Welcome to another News of the Week episode, and another week where we have tons of news that we have to go over, that I once again will have to switch the board at least once in this News of the Week video to just talk about the numerous signings that has happened in these last 3 days, and that this is also a time where I am going to just warn you guys that if I mispronounce some of the names on this board in terms of those players that is going to be signed with an MLS team, or they're rumored to go to an MLS team, I do apologize that, because you all know that I am not the best in terms of pronouncing names, especially some of those names in Eastern Europe that I always tend to kind of mispronounce, and even some kind of Spanish name where it's some of them are not kind of like generic Spanish name, or some that is kind of a little bit hard to pronounce. Yeah, expect me to kind of mispronounce those names, but I of course will get better once if these players are going to be signed with an MLS team. The more that I hear people say their name, the more I will pretty much go with the pronunciation of their names as the year goes on. But before we talk about some signings that has happened during these last couple of days, the first thing I got to talk about is Kyle Beckerman, who yesterday he announced his retirement after a legendary 20-year MLS career during his time in MLS. And there's no doubt that I am going to make a video about Kyle Beckerman and talking about his career in MLS, because not only the fact that he is considered probably one of the best midfielder, or maybe even the best midfielder to ever play in this league, but the longevity of his career and the fact that I don't think there's any MLS player that I know of that have that long of an MLS career as Kyle Beckerman has, and also the fact that he currently is the all-time leader in terms of appearance and minutes in MLS by an outfield player. I don't think that is going to be something that's going to be replicated, especially how the league nowadays is kind of a selling league, and that we usually see players kind of go out of the league or go in the league for more quickly than what we've seen in the past. So we probably would not see kind of these players like Kyle Beckerman where they are basically in the league for that long of a period, and especially the fact that it's quite remarkable during his 20-year career that he didn't really suffer a lot of injuries during his 20-year career. I mean, usually when you have a long career in a specific league, sometime maybe you have some injury issue in one of those years. That was not the case for Kyle Beckerman, and that is kind of the reason why he was able to rack up so many minutes in the league and also made a ton of appearances. But I of course will definitely make a video about it, and I'll either make it tomorrow on Christmas Eve or after Christmas, when I of course do a career video talking about Kyle Beckerman. Now, moving on, in terms of some of the signings that has happened in the last couple of days. Well, we start off with Austin FC, who signed defender Johan Jimenez. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Again, this is the beginning of me just kind of completely butchering a lot of these names. I don't really know much about this defender, but apparently I think when they decided to get him, they think that he is going to be one of those players that could be a starting center back for this team. Now, going to a more well-known signing and well-known player that I know that Austin FC have also acquired is Andrew Tarbell and Hector Jimenez, who they were able to acquire from the Columbus Crew. Both of them came from free agency, and unless if Austin FC decided to not acquire another goalkeeper, I think Andrew Tarbell most likely is going to be the starting goalkeeper for Austin FC. It's great to see that Tarbell finally gets a chance to basically get a starting role for an MLS team, because I thought when Tarbell was with the Quakes, I know he had a difficult time, and there was definitely a lot of criticism, which I'm going to admit I was one of those that was very critical of Tarbell, of his time with the Quakes. And when he was with the Columbus Crew, even though he was there as a backup role, he made definitely more appearance that I thought he was going to make as a backup at the Columbus Crew than what I thought and what many people thought. But when he was able to be be starting as a backup for the Columbus Crew. He definitely shown his quality, and that you just kind of see that this was another example of a players where they might have a difficult time with a certain team, but then when they got a trade to another team and get a change of scenery, they can definitely do very well. And that, you know, I'm pretty sure with the way that Austin FC saw how good Tarbell was doing during his time with Columbus, they thought that they need to, of course, snatch him up. And that there's no doubt that unless if Austin is going to potentially sign another goalkeeper, that he probably is going to be the starter. Hector Jimenez, you know, he is a long-time player for the Columbus Crew, a versatile player for this team that I think will be a very good signing for this one. But yeah, you know, this is definitely good business that Austin FC done in these last couple of days. Although later on in this news of the week, I'm going to talk about one player that they got in the expansion draft, and that they kind of made a little bit of a mistake in terms of getting that player in the expansion draft, and that this is also kind of something that we rarely see happen, but it actually happened during these last couple of days. Now, another well-known player, and probably one of the best player in MLS, that is Bradley Wright Phillips. Well, he has officially signed with the Columbus Crew off of free agency. I believe in the last News of the Week episode, I talked about the fact that he was close to signing with the Crew. Well, this basically confirmed that he is going to be going to the Columbus Crew, and it makes sense why BWP is going to the Columbus Crew, knowing the fact that if Jersey Zardes is going to be in the U.S. men's national team during the Gold Cup run, then Columbus will also have a good backup option in BWP, and we can see that even though BWP is getting to that time where he is in the twilight of his career, he is still a very quality kind of player and can still banging some goals, as we saw in that MLS's back tournament with LAFC. So I think this is definitely a good signing, and definitely one of the best backup striker that I think any team is get the luxury of getting. Now, New England is another team that's been a bit busy in terms of these last couple of days of transfer window. They've just signed former Barcelona and Real Betis midfielder Wilfred Kempton, I think that's how you pronounce, and they also re-signed Tommy McNamara to a new contract. Now, in terms of Wilfred Kempton, I heard he was last playing in the Segunda division, and that, you know, I also heard that he could definitely be a very decent signing and improve that midfield for New England. Whereas for Tommy McNamara getting a new contract, this is definitely not a big surprise. I mean, as much as I know Tommy McNamara does have his critics, and that some people do kind of finds it frustrating at times, the way that his quality is definitely not up there in terms of an elite midfielder for an MLS team. But that being said, his personality and the way that he also is kind of a workhorse and a good backup option is what makes him very special, and that really you just cannot hate Tommy McNamara whatsoever. I mean, you always want him to do well, and always want him to eventually still be playing for an MLS team. And the good news for Tommy Mac is that he's going to be staying with New England for at least another year. Now, Dallas is another team that's been busy in terms of the last couple of days making signings. One of the signings that they made was signing Colombian winger Jada Obradin with target allocation money. And the first thing when I saw this news of them signing this player just kind of makes me wonder, are they going to try to get another Michael Barrios? I mean, you know, he and Barrios came from the same country and pretty much play in the same position. I don't know if he's going to be as speedy as what Michael Barrios is, but clearly Dallas is looking to try to get kind of another type of Michael Barrios kind of player, and trying to add more pace in terms of the winger area. While Dallas, besides acquiring him, also acquired center back Jose Antonio Martinez from Eibar. Even though he, of course, played for Eibar, I'm not so sure was he actually a regular starter for this team, and this is also another player that I don't really know a lot about, besides the fact that he does play with a very respectable team in La Liga. But certainly they feel like he could be a decent option for for the center back role for this team. So that's why they of course decide to acquire him, and we shall see whether or not if he can do well once he joined Dallas and be good in that defensive role for this team. Now, Atlanta United decided to bring back Mikey Ambrose from Inter Miami, and you know, when Atlanta decided to let go of Mikey Ambrose and eventually join with Inter Miami, it was kind of a little bit strange why they decided to let him go, considering he was definitely a good depth piece for Atlanta in terms of the defense. Well, it seemed like Atlanta saw that is the case, and that's why they decided to bring him back. And that now once again they're gonna have some depth in terms of the defense, and depth is something that I'm pretty sure a lot of these teams, and you notice a lot of these teams during this offseason, not only the fact that they're looking to try to fill in some holes that their roster has, but they also want to get some depth piece player on their team, because depth, especially of the way that we don't know exactly when the season is going to start, and if we're going to once again have a situation where there's a lot of games that is going to play in a short amount of period, you definitely want to booster that depth, and you definitely want to have a couple of backup players in case if you're going to have so much games in a span of a short amount of time that you just don't want to just keep putting your starters in every single game and kind of burn them out as the season goes. So that's why I think this off season, you know, I know in the past a lot of teams would want to make signings to improve their depth, but I think it's more important than ever before, knowing the fact that, you know, we saw last season of how the season was basically cut short, and that there was just tons of games in a short amount of period, and depth was definitely tested pretty much of every single team, and that I think every single team realized that they could be once again in that similar experience heading into next year. That's why they want to of course booster their depth, and that I think Atlanta is one of those teams that are looking to try to bring back some of their older players to improve their depth and be ready for next season, in case if they're going to be like pretty much every single MLS team that's going to be endure in just a ton of games in a short amount of period. Now, Inter Miami has acquired Patrick Segres from the New York Red Bulls in exchange for $50,000 general allocation money. Now, this guy, he of course was a first-round draft pick for the Red Bulls a couple of years ago, but he didn't really play a lot with the Red Bulls. I believe he only made 3 starts for the teams, and you know, knowing the fact that Inter Miami did lose Ben Sweat to Austin FC, and that they're looking to try to maybe get a replacement, I'm not quite sure if Patrick Segres is the guy that they're going to replace. And again, this is a guy that didn't really make a lot of starts for the Red Bulls, and that the fact that you know if he doesn't have a lot of starting minutes for an MLS team, it's kind of odd to try to bring a player into your roster and expect him to be a regular starter. But that being said, that might be the case where he could potentially be replacing Ben Sweat in that spot, and he might be getting minutes for Inter Miami. Or maybe this is just a case where maybe Patrick Segres was not getting minutes for the Red Bulls, and that he wants to go to Inter Miami to get some starting minutes, and we'll see whether or not if that of course is going to be the case. And the fact that they didn't really pay a lot of money. I mean, usually when you pay very little money to get a player, you usually don't maybe make that player as your starters, or you're just spending very few of that money to try to improve your depth. But we shall see whether or not if he's going to be just a starter for this team, or is he going to be one of those depth pieces in terms of the defensive situation for Inter Miami. Now, Sporting KC have just signed French midfielder Remy Walter a couple of days ago, and I'm guessing this is probably a replacement for Felipe Gutierrez. And I say probably because, you know, right now the situation with Felipe Gutierrez is definitely interesting for SKC. They just recently reselect him in the re-entry draft, but they still have not kind of offered him a contract, or whether or not if he's going to be staying with this team. So knowing the fact that there's some uncertainty of whether they're going to keep Felipe Gutierrez heading into next season, they decided that they might as well trying to maybe look for his replacement while they're trying to get the deals to do. And I don't know much about this guy other than the fact that I think he played in Turkey before well he used to play in Turkey before he of course was in the French league, but you know we'll see whether or not if this is a replacement for Felipe Gutierrez, or the fact that is this just a depth signing that SKC want to booster their depth in terms of the midfield. Now, moving on into the last news before I switch the board is to talk about earlier I said that Austin FC did make a mistake in the expansion draft, and that this is something we rarely see happens, but when it does happen, it definitely draw a lot of confusion. So remember how Austin FC, one of their draft pick, which I think it was the third pick in the expansion draft, they decided to get Joe Corona from the Galaxy. Well, now just a couple of days later, it looked like he's not going to be going to Austin FC, but instead going to the Houston Dynamo. But this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Instead of Houston decided to maybe just pay Austin FC a couple of those Gabber buck in order to get Joe Corona, Houston actually didn't pay anything, and that they actually got him off of the re-entry draft. Now, you wonder, how in the world did Joe Corona end up to be in the re-entry draft when he basically just drafted in the expansion draft? And aren't players are not allowed to go into the re-entry draft once they, of course, drafted in the expansion draft? Well, at first, that's what I kind of thought that was the case, but then I kind of did a little bit research in that there is a specific rule where, you know, if you are going to draft a player from the expansion draft, they do have the option of whether or not if they're going to opt in to the contract that you provide, or they're going to be opt out and decide to go into the re-entry draft. And it's also important to note that Joe Corona was out of contract when Austin FC decided to select him, and I guess there was a specific rule where if you're picking a player that is out of contract, they do have the option to opt in into the re-entry draft. So because of that, Austin basically, or Joe Corona basically decided he's going to go to the re-entry draft because he doesn't want to join Austin FC, and Houston basically just kind of snatched him off of that. And the other thing that I've also heard is that when Austin FC decided to select Joe Corona, I heard there's rumors saying that they did not even make any contact with Joe Corona, but when they decide to select him, and that I think this is something that for future expansion team, this is one thing that they need to learn in the future, because when you're going to the expansion draft and you're selecting these players, I really hope that these future expansion team at least talk to some of those players that they are planning to select. I mean, obviously it's not easy to potentially talk to a player that you want to select in the expansion draft, because you know the player that you might select in the expansion draft, the other team probably won't want you to talk to them. But there's also a situation where we could have something similar to this, where when you don't have any communication with a player and then you just kind of randomly select him in the expansion draft, he probably could say, no, I don't want to join that team, I want to opt in into the re-entry draft. And basically Austin FC just kind of lost a player and just kind of got duped in terms of that situation. So I think in the future, I think expansion team and teams like Sacramento, St. Louis, and Charlotte, you know, they probably would take note the fact that, you know, if they're going to potentially pick players in the expansion draft, they need to at least try to maybe talk to those players, and whether or not if they're willing to play for your team before you, of course, selecting them. But again, obviously that's not going to be easy to say, because I know for a fact that if you're going to pick a player from the expansion draft from another team, that other team is probably not going to allow you to talk to those players, and that it just gets to a point where it kind of doesn't really brings the excitement of the expansion draft. And kind of, if there was kind of sources saying that, well, you know, this expansion team is going to potentially pick him because they had talks with him of potentially picking him in the draft, that kind of lessened the excitement in terms of the expansion draft. But it also could basically be a solution in terms of seeing what happened in this instant. And that for Austin FC, it's just kind of unfortunate that they kind of got duped in terms of this very confusing rule that it was in place in MLS, but it is actually a rule, and that I believe the MLS Players Association actually agrees with this rule and kind of come up with a rule that their players can have the option to opt in or opt out of a contract and go into the re-entry draft, especially for players that is out of contract. But that being said, I am now going to switch the boards and look at some of the rumors that has happened in the last couple of days, because, you know, for this board I've been talking about most of the signings that has happened in the last couple of days, but it's time to talk about some of the rumors that has happened with a couple of players that has been linked with MLS team in these last couple of days. So now talking about the reports and players that potentially are going to be coming to MLS, and even there's a couple of players that is going to be heading out to MLS and be going to different leagues. Well, first of all, we start off with a rumors that Benfica winger Franco Servi is rumored to head to Orlando City or FC Dallas. Now, I have a feeling this could potentially be a DP kind of signing, because he used to be a regular starter for Benfica, and then he kind of eventually lost his spot and kind of dropped down in the pecking order. But he's definitely a very, very decent winger, and I'm pretty sure Orlando City and FC Dallas really wants him. Now, I'm also pretty sure that maybe, most likely, Orlando City could be his destination, knowing the fact that Orlando City, they're thinking about potentially getting a replacement for Nani, and knowing the fact that Nani is starting to get a little bit older and that maybe he has 1 or 2 more seasons left in his leg with Orlando City, they really need to think about potentially replacing him, and that this could be a guy that they can potentially replace him. And knowing the fact that Dallas have already signed a winger and they already have some good depth in terms of the winger spot, I don't really think they need to add another winger, especially if they're going to potentially spend DP money to get a winger. Maybe this might not be the option for them, but we shall see whether or not if he is going to be coming to MLS, and whether if he is going to be joining one of these 2 teams, as the rumor has been linked. Now, New England Revolution left back Alex Butner is going to set to join Apoel FC, and that, you know, originally I first thought that this was just kind of a rumor saying that Alex Butner could be leaving the Revs and that he's going to be going to Cyprus to join the biggest team in Cyprus in Apoel FC, but it looked like now the rumor basically is going to be true, and that it's just a matter of time before Alex Butner is not gonna be a Revs player, and that he's gonna be going back to Europe. And it's such a shame the fact that the Revs weren't able to keep him, because I thought Butner, even though last season he did kind of had to battles with some injury, and that eventually he did lose his starting spots to DeJuan Jones, I thought he could be a decent option as either a backup or a starting left back in the league. But fortunately, the Revs weren't able to hold on to him, and that Butner decided that he wanted to go back to Europe instead of staying with the Revs, and it seemed like it's going to be a matter of time before he is going to be going back to Europe. And as I said, he's going to be joining the biggest team in Cyprus in Apoel FC. Now, Nashville is also rumored and set to sign Uruguayan youth international winger Rodrigo Pinheiro, and this is a guy that I've heard that he is a very high potential player down in Uruguay, and that he could definitely be decent if he does come to MLS. And knowing the fact that Nashville this offseason, their priority obviously is going to be focusing on the attack, because after last season, knowing the fact that their main strength is their defense, and their biggest weakness is going forward on the attack, where they're kind of a little bit lackluster and need some more attacking power in terms of that, I'm not surprised the fact that Nashville is kind of taking the usual route of going down to South America, looking for those hidden gems and these young players, and trying to bring them up to MLS to develop them and eventually sell them off of a profit. Now, the Red Bulls kind of did that a couple of years ago with Kaku, and that they actually made a big signing and splash a lot of money for Kaku to come into the league. And I remember when Kaku first came into the league, he was definitely a stud and was considered one of the best number 10 in the league. But throughout the last couple of years, yeah, things have kind of take the turn for its worst for Kaku, and he kind of fell out of favor for the Red Bulls. And not to mention, he was also battling with injuries, and that it's no surprise that the Red Bulls basically say that they could potentially be selling Kaku this offseason, and that there's now rumors saying that he is going to be going to a Liga MX team. Now, I believe just 2 years ago, he was actually linked with Club America, and that at that time, I thought, you know, for the Red Bulls, I still think it was a good idea, the fact that they hold on to Kaku and not allow him to go to Club America, knowing the fact that he was such a valuable player back when he was in such a good form. But I'm pretty sure if they were going to get another offer from a Liga MX team, or if it's from Club America again, I'm pretty sure the Red Bulls will basically accept that offer without a heartbeat of how Kaku has been in these last couple of years. But we shall see which team is he potentially going to be linked with and how much money that the Red Bulls are going to get. No doubt the Red Bulls are in a transitional year where they're starting to get rid of some of these old guard that they had and looking to try to pump in some of these fresh players coming out of the Red Bulls Academy, and that they're pretty much going to be the next core piece for this Red Bulls heading into the future. Now, Ralph Felcher is a player that has been confirmed to be leaving MLS and going to be the one of those players that is going to be going back to Europe, and he actually is going to be signed with FC Wurzburger Kickers in the 2nd division of Bundesliga. And can we just first admire how badass of a name that is, FC Wurzburger Kickers? Like, why can MLS team can come up with some badass name like this instead of nowadays where the trend with MLS team just seems to always go with these generic European soccer name like FC United and SC and stuff like that. But this is kind of surprising, the fact that he is able to go back to Europe and still be in a respectable league, because I was assuming now that he kind of fell out of favor with the Galaxy, he would potentially be going to even a lower league down in Europe. But the 2nd division in Bundesliga is right around par of what MLS is, and that, you know, I think this he is going to definitely enjoy his time to go back to Europe. And that, you know, for the Galaxy, I'm not quite sure if they got anything out of this, but it was unsurprised that they were eventually going to let go of Ralph Felcher, because as much as Felcher at times he could be a decent defender for this Galaxy team, there's more time or not that he has been a liability for this Galaxy defense, and it's no surprise that they eventually are going to let him go and look for a better option in terms of the defensive end for their team. And then finally, in terms of the last news of the week, involved the CONCACAF Champions League, who their president have just said that CCL will officially expand in 2023, and that there will be VAR heading into next year's competition. Now, in terms of the expansion part, I'm really hoping when they do expand the competition in 2023, this means that we go back in the old format of CCL, where there's kind of like group stages, and then there's kind of like a knockout competition. And as much as I know CCL nowadays are kind of a very quick kind of competition where you just have kind of a knockout stage, and all these teams that qualify into CCL are going to be in the round of 16, but I do miss that element where all these teams are in the group stage and you have to be like the top 2 team to make it to the knockout stage. Just kind of makes it feel like what a Champions League should have been, and that I never understand why they decided to get rid of that. But another thing that I'm also kind of excited about them expanding it in 2023 is that hopefully this give them more teams that they're going to or this will give more Central American team and Canadian team a chance to be in this competition, because I really feel like when you look at CCL and look at the teams that is in this competition, it is pretty clear that they are putting a lot of emphasis and have heavy favoritism toward Liga MX and MLS team, and that there just feels like there's not enough Central American team and especially Canadian team to be in this competition. And we know that with Canadian team, and especially with the Canadian Premier League, I really hope eventually when they do expand it that there's going to be at least one Canadian Premier League team to be in CCL, because we saw last year where I think it was Forge FC that was in the CONCACAF League, and they actually did very decent in that league. And definitely I think they could, if this competition is going to be expanded in 2023, why not give these Canadian Premier League team like Forge FC that have done well in the other competition in CONCACAF be able to give them a chance to see how they will do against even bigger team. And the other thing about Central American team is that I really felt like Central American team, they're definitely getting much stronger as the year goes on. Like, I know in these last couple of years, you can definitely see Central American team that have really gave headaches to Liga MX team, and especially MLS team. I mean, this season, Olympia made it all the way to the semifinal and even beat the defending champion of MLS, that is the Seattle Sounders, in the first round. And you also see a lot of these Central American team when they play against Liga MX team, they actually play them very hard. And that Liga MX team had trouble in the past in terms of navigating the Central American team. And that, I think the bottom line is, I think if we're going to give more chances for these Central American team to represent in CONCACAF Champions League, and also maybe a couple of Canadian team instead of just one team that is representing this competition, it will definitely bring more diversity into this competition. Because after all, this is the CONCACAF Champions League. This is not the League Cup where it's Liga MX versus MLS. You know, the Champions League is supposed to represent the whole region, not just basically on two countries. Now, in terms of them having VAR in 2021, now I know some people will say that, well, now that they have VAR in 2021, that means we're probably not going to see those shithousery that we saw in the CONCACAF Champions League, and that it kind of does, some people will say it kind of does take a little less fun in terms of talk about how the CONCACAF Champions League seems to always have some ridiculous decision, and that there's going to be lesser chance of a team that is going to get the so-called CONCACAF kind of treatment. Well, that, of course, is not going to be the case. I mean, I have no doubt that even though they're going to have VAR in 2021, don't be surprised they're going to do a very bad job of it. Like, we already have seen other leagues when they decided to implement VAR, leagues like the MLS and the Premier League, of how when they implement VAR, and that they were hoping that this will kind of fix problems with these controversial calls that was a big issue before the VAR era. It didn't. It's still a big issue, and that I have no doubt that, you know, if these referees are not doing a good job in terms of refereeing CONCACAF Champions League game, then how much faith do you have in terms of them trying to operate this system? And that I can bet that they probably is even going to do a worse job in terms of using VAR, and that I won't be surprised that heading into next year, we're still going to have this kind of discussion and just some frustration, the fact that, well, why in the world is this call being overturned by VAR, or why it didn't overturn by VAR, and what in the world is clear and obvious anymore? Is it just once again a judgment call, as we have pretty much seen with VAR being implemented in all these leagues? So yeah, I don't think anything is going to change. I think there's still going to be some shithousery that's going to be happening in the CONCACAF Champions League, even if VAR is going to be introduced. But that being said, that is pretty much it for all the news that I have mentioned. And again, this has been a very long video because there's been a lot of talking point for these last couple of days, and hopefully now that we're heading into the Christmas holiday, maybe there's going to be not as much talking point, and that maybe I don't have to do a news of the week video on Saturday because we're in the Christmas break period. But you never know. You know, there might be some more news to kind of talk about, and that I'm definitely not going to complain if there's going to be more news to talk about, because that's just give me more chance to kind of talk more content about the craziness that is the MLS off season. But either way, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these news on the board, and if there's any news that I didn't mention on the board, let me know in the comments below. But until then, hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you guys next time.